Information-fueled.
Opinion-driven.
This is Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis.
And so, my fellow Americans,
we talk news.
8:06, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Good morning to you, friends. Dan Mandis here along with Joan Jones. Jeff Malinoff is producing. Brian Wilson is on the Newsmaker Hotline. Brian, always, of course, great to have you on. And I hate to interrupt your retirement, but I appreciate having you on. Can we be honest, Brian? Can we be honest? You're looking for something to do?
Well, no, believe me, retirement, as such as it's been so far, has been kept me very busy. I mean, I've already cleaned the garage.
And it looks really nice. All those pictures, they look good.
Thank you. And then I rebuilt my home studio, my recording studio. And, give me about a week and I'll have this place whipped into shape. It's hard work. Radio's not all that hard work. It's mentally challenging, but it's not really physical labor. So, I've been sore every night ever since I retired.
Listen, Brian, after you get done rebuilding the studio and cleaning your garage and all those other honeydews that, we men tend to do, I've got a few things over at the house. If you want to clean out my garage and maybe take down my inflatables because they're still up from Christmas, you'd feel free to come by.
So maybe that's my post-retirement part-time job, just going around cleaning people's garages. That would be.
All right. So you had a great photo on your Facebook page of a far younger looking Brian Wilson, and you are interviewing Jimmy Carter. It's a great photo. And tell me about that moment. Then we're going to get into some political analysis.
Well, I arrived in Washington for the end of the second term of Ronald Reagan. So I did not cover President Carter in Washington, but I did meet him on a couple of different occasions. The picture that I posted there was during the Clinton presidency, where there had been a breakthrough in the Mideast peace process, and because Carter was well known for the Camp David Accords, he had been brought in and was there at the event, and he was very accessible, very willing to talk, and very approachable. And then the second time I think I interviewed him was on the set when I was working for WTTG, and he had come up with a book and was on a book tour. So the Secret Service shows up one morning, and there's Jimmy Carter, and we sat down and talked about his book, which at this moment, for the life of me, can't remember what it was about. But he was always, as a president, I think, the cliche, there's a reason it's a cliche because there's some truth in it. Mm-hmm. He was not a great president, but a very good ex-president. And you look at some of the things he accomplished post-presidency, and you would have to say that's a life well lived for anyone, and did a lot of good for a lot of people who needed help. His presidency was marred by a lot of things, including the Iranian hostage crisis, high gas prices. He just was not a very effective president when you look at things other than the Camp David Accords. Foreign policy, maybe he had some things to be proud of, but really the accomplishments of the Jimmy Carter one-term presidency were not that much.
Brian, do you remember the really long gas lines?
I do. And, one of the things that you have to say is if it hadn't been for Jimmy Carter and, having such a sort of unsuccessful presidency, marred mostly by the Iranian hostage crisis, it probably would have not set the stage for someone like Ronald Reagan.
That's exactly right.
So Ronald Reagan came in behind him, was as the antithesis to whatever Jimmy Carter was, and people were ready for that. But I think you have to judge presidents based on the time in which they were elected. And, not looking back, we think about the hostage crisis, giving away Panama Canal, which has been a story we've been talking about lately.
Yep.
And all of the other things that weren't great about the Carter presidency. He was elected post-Watergate.
Yep.
And people were looking for a man of character, and people were looking for a man perhaps of faith. And Jimmy Carter was both of those things, a man of character and a man of deep, religious faith. And I think, I have to say, as a young man, I looked at that and I said, well, I'm going to vote for Carter. And I did. which is a good reason why we probably shouldn't let 18-year-olds vote. But then, I became a Reagan Republican after that and have been ever since. I really came on board with all that.
Well,
it wasn't so much about party then as it was about, I liked the character of the man. And
Isn't
I thought he was
interesting,
a good man.
though?
And he was.
You talk about, and I made this point earlier, but you talk about Carter and how he was the gateway to Reagan, just like Joe Biden was so terrible that he's the gateway to another term of Donald Trump. So it's like they have that in common.
There are very similar parallels there. I really do.
All right. So who do you think, Brian Wilson, is the worst president, Jimmy Carter or Joe Biden?
Well, I think history is going to reveal with time as we learn more about what was really going on behind the scenes at the Biden White House. I think it's going to be Biden. I think he should never have been elected, and never was fully in control of his own presidency. I don't think, because I don't think he had the mental capacity to do it. And the stories we're hearing now about how they were propping him up and the things that were going on behind the scenes, it is terrifying, quite frankly, to me, that we had a president who really was not in charge or capable of being in charge of his own presidency. So I think over time, as we look back, we'll look at Biden as the worst president, although Jimmy Carter would be a close second, in my estimation. A good man, not a great president.
So here's my question, because it brings up so many different conversations. So when you look at with Joe Biden, you've got the economy, you've got the pullout of Afghanistan, failed pullout of Afghanistan, you've got the wide open border, right? So then who do you blame? Do you blame Joe Biden? Do you blame the apparatus of the Democrat Party? Who do you blame if Joe Biden really wasn't the guy pulling the strings?
Well, I think you have to look at a very liberal staff and a lot of handlers that are, that were around within an administration. There are always these people who are, the chief of staff and the people who handle things like Jake Sullivan on foreign affairs. I think they were basically running the show. And I don't think all that much got to Joe Biden. They had to take it to him for the big decisions and consider what he had to say. But I think he was also very pliable in his current state. And I think, whoever got to him last, that was the policy. And I think that the very left deep state is basically running the Biden administration and has been almost since day one.
All right. So then, then here's the question. And I'm going to ask you the question. Then I'm going to let you cogitate on that. And I got to jump the traffic. But my question is this. Knowing what we know and knowing what the Wall Street Journal has reported about the very protective cocoon around Joe Biden, wasn't holding a lot of cabinet meetings, people that needed to speak to Joe Biden could not speak to Joe Biden. You had one congressman, I think his name was Adam Smith, where he was trying to get in touch with the president because he had concerns about the failed pullout of Afghanistan before that pullout, and he wasn't able to get to the president. Then, of course, we all know what happened in that pullout. 13 members of our military died. The question is this. How aggressive should the Republicans be in calling for and executing an investigation into who knew what related to the last 4 years of the Biden administration? I'm going to ask you to answer that on the other side. It is 8:15, time to check the roads on WTN. 8:15 on Nashville's Morning News. Later today, it's going to be cloudy with a high of 60. Right now, 49 degrees and sunshine here in Nashville. Appreciate you listening to Super Talk 99.7. Brian Wilson is joining us. All right, so Brian, let's be honest. The investigation into Hunter Biden by the Republicans, James Comer, all that stuff didn't really seem to amount to a whole heck of a lot. And I think there's a lot of Republicans who are just a little ticked off that we didn't see more coming out of those investigations. So now the question is, all right, so now, how aggressively should the Republicans look into what happened over the last 4 years?
Well, I mean, there's two ways to look at this. Number one is, do we deserve the answers? Yes, I think we deserve the answers. And do we want to get involved in tit for tat and weaponize the whole system like it's been weaponized against us? I would be against that, but I do think we deserve the answers. And I think as we find out the answers, we're going to find out a lot more. I will not be surprised if Biden pardons himself on the way out the door or something like that, because I think he's got things that he needs to answer for, which he has not answered, especially how involved he was in the businesses of his son when he was vice president. So he doesn't want to face that. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does it on the way out the door. If he does that, it sort of confirms things, doesn't it? I mean, why would you pardon yourself if you didn't do anything wrong? So I think that's part of it. But the other part of me is, I sort of like to think in political terms of looking forward rather than looking backwards. I mean, at this point, what good does it do? Shouldn't we focus on accomplishing things? And I think if we do that, I think that will resonate well with the American people, rather than, a bunch of backward-looking investigations that, plod on and on and on. I'm not sure that the country is well served by that, but I do wish we could get some answers.
Well, I mean, it's not only Joe Biden, but it's also the people who were surrounding him, right? I mean, you've got Jill, you've got Barack Obama, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but you've got, all of that inner Biden circle that knew, according to the Wall Street Journal, knew what was going on. So if you investigate, then the next question obviously is, okay, so let's say that you figure out who knew what when, but then what? I mean, do you run around and you start charging Jill Biden? I don't know what you do. So it's almost like to what end? And I think that I agree with you, is that the best revenge is success. And that's what Donald Trump is looking to do. And that is to be successful and just rack up the wins. So we'll have to see what happens. Last question.
Yeah, listen, I like that approach, and I'm very happy to hear him say that.
Yeah.
That he's not going to be doing a lot of backwards glancing, and success is the thing that matters, and the thing that he'll be judged upon in his second term as president. So I think that's the right way to go.
Brian, last question, and I don't know if you've paid much attention to this story, but I find it interesting. The H-1B visa battle. So
yeah,
you've got Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and David Sachs, these high-tech guys who were critical, in my opinion, especially Elon Musk, in getting Donald Trump elected. They're all for expanding this visa program. Elon finally came out and said, well, it needs to be fixed. But you've got all of these folks that are supporters of Donald Trump, MAGA Nation, who are very much against the H-1B visa program. So Trump is sort of stuck in the middle between millions of his supporters who are against this and his inner circle, which is for the program. So Trump seems to be in sort of a precarious position here.
Well, the way I look at that is, here's what I'll say about Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. If they come with a position, I think you can be pretty certain it's data-driven, that they can back up their arguments of why this is important. And they're looking at it from the standpoint of high-tech entrepreneurs who are looking for skilled people to come into the country on visas, like H-1B visas. And so they're looking at it from a business standpoint. I think most of MAGA world just feels like the border situation has been so bad that it just doesn't land well with us when we hear people say, you're going to do what? You want to expand H-1B visas? I want to get more information on that and find out why they feel so passionately about it, because they do. I mean, they're very passionate about it, and Trump seems to be convinced by those arguments. But I think if Trump gets in there on day one and does the things that he says he's going to do with regard to the border, and believe me, I think Tom Homan is champing at the bit to get started from everything that I can see.
Oh, yeah.
I think Americans will be well pleased with what happens, and will be willing at least to listen to the arguments for the expansion of H-1B visas. But I want to hear a little bit more from those guys as to why they feel so strongly about it.
All right, very good. Brian Wilson, thank you very much for joining us. Hey, Brian, what are you doing today? Anything fun?
Well, right now I'm sitting outside of a Loveless Cafe about to consume biscuits and gravy, which is a good thing to be doing on a Monday morning.
All right. Thank you, Brian, and looking forward to more analysis just like that in the months and years ahead. Love Brian Wilson and his analysis. All right, 8:21. Joan Jones is in the dust-encrusted WTN newsroom. Joan, what's coming up?
It's a corner. It's a news corner.
Sorry, you're right. You don't have a room.
I do not. Yeah.
You have like a corner.
It works.
And let's be honest, it's not a big corner at that.
It's not.
Hey,
want to let you know that there is a national day of mourning that's been declared now after the death of former President Jimmy Carter. Also, we'll tell you why D.C. officials say they're working hard to remove some transit ads that popped up all over town ahead of the inauguration. That's all coming up at 8:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.